Long ago, before peace councils and trade routes, the galaxy was full of war. Different species fought for planets, for resources, for survival. Among them were humans, a young species compared to the ancient empires. The aliens first thought humans were weak because their bodies were small, their technology was simple, and their homeworld was not remarkable. But when the fighting began, they discovered something they had never seen before. Humans were not like other soldiers. They did not stop when they were tired. They did not surrender when they were surrounded. They fought with a kind of madness that even the fiercest alien warriors could not understand. At first, the other races admired it. They welcomed human allies into their armies. Humans were placed in the front lines, where they became both a shield and a spear. They fought in mud, in snow, in burning skies. While other species followed orders carefully, humans improvised. They made traps out of broken machines. They turned ruins into weapons. Even without food or water, they kept moving forward. Their enemies began to fear them, whispering stories that humans could not be killed in the same way as others, that they would rise again even after being burned or crushed. As the wars dragged on, a strange thing happened. Battles where humans fought turned into nightmares. The enemies fled, not because of overwhelming numbers, but because of the sight of human eyes burning with determination. Entire armies refused to fight if they heard that humans were present. Some alien generals even pulled their soldiers back, fearing that humans would unleash destruction so great it would not stop with the enemy, but consume everything in sight. The galaxy began to see humans differently. They were not just allies, they were unpredictable. They did not fight like soldiers who wanted medals or honor. They fought like creatures who had nothing to lose, who would burn everything to win. Even in victory, humans were terrifying. Their allies looked at them with unease. After battles, when the smoke cleared, the humans stood covered in blood and dirt, smiling, joking, or sometimes silent with empty eyes. To other species, it was unnatural. Councils were formed to discuss the human problem. Whispers spread among rulers. If humans were left unchecked, would they turn on their allies one day? Could anyone control a force that did not fear death? Some argued that humans were too valuable to lose. Others said they were too dangerous to keep. Stories spread of human units that continued fighting even after their commanders were killed, of soldiers who charged alone into enemy lines and somehow won. These stories were not seen as bravery anymore. They were seen as warnings. The final decision came after one war that shook the stars. The humans had fought against a race of warlords who enslaved entire planets. No one could defeat these warlords. Their weapons were advanced, their armies huge, but the humans went in with fury. They lost thousands of soldiers in days, yet they pushed deeper and deeper until the warlords were broken. When it was over, victory belonged to the humans. But so did horror. Cities were destroyed beyond repair. The land was poisoned with fire and blood. Even allies who celebrated survival looked at the humans with fear. The cost of victory was too high, and only humans had been willing to pay it. So the Galactic Council gathered. After long debates, they made a new law. Humans were to be banned from the battlefield. No human soldier, no human weapon, no human strategy was to be used in future wars. The official words were kind. They said it was to protect humans, to give them a chance to live in peace. But everyone knew the truth. The ban was not for protection, it was fear. The other species had seen what humans could do, and they wanted it locked away. Generations passed, and the ban remained. Young aliens grew up hearing only fragments of the old tales. To them, humans were just merchants and explorers. They laughed at the idea of humans being dangerous. They thought the ban was a myth or a story meant to flatter humans. But deep inside the records of the council, in the voices of commanders who had seen human fury with their own eyes, the truth was written. There was a reason for the ban. And those who had once fought beside humans never forgot the terror of watching an ally who would fight to the very last breath, no matter the cost. Time passed and the galaxy forgot. The wars ended, treaties were signed, and the stories of human soldiers became whispers told by old veterans that few believed. Humans themselves drifted away from war. They built ships to trade across the stars, they opened schools on distant colonies, and they became known as clever diplomats and stubborn explorers rather than fighters. Their children grew up learning about commerce, science, and art, not about weapons. To most of the galaxy, humans were harmless, just another species trying to survive among many. The young generations of aliens laughed at the old stories. They heard of humans who fought with bare hands, humans who refused to die even when burned and broken, humans who charged into battles that no one else would dare. But to them, these tales sounded like myths, exaggerated by fear and retold as legends. They saw humans working in markets, repairing ships, and telling long, amusing stories in council halls. How could such creatures ever have been feared? They were too small, too fragile, too emotional. The Galactic Council itself began to treat the ban like an outdated rule. Officially, the law still stood: no human soldiers in war. But in practice, no one cared anymore. No wars were large enough to demand such a choice, and no humans had asked to join one in generations. The ban became like dust on an old book, forgotten, ignored, unnecessary. Yet not everyone dismissed the old tales. There were still commanders and elders who had seen it with their own eyes. They were quiet now, sitting in the shadows of power, rarely speaking. But when they did, their voices carried a weight of memory that made listeners uneasy. They would say, "Do not laugh at the ban. It is not a story, it is a warning." And then they would fall silent, refusing to explain further. But most did laugh. Most dismissed it. To the galaxy, humans had become gentle, curious wanderers who liked to ask too many questions and tell too many jokes. They seemed incapable of the savagery their ancestors once showed. Aliens began to use the word human as an insult, a way to call someone weak or sentimental. When human diplomats spoke of peace, some rulers smirked. When human traders bargained, some merchants mocked their persistence. When human explorers asked for help in dangerous regions, some soldiers sneered that humans should stay safe on their little blue planet. The quiet years rolled on like this. A galaxy convinced itself that humans were soft, incapable of real violence, unworthy of the old legends. But behind the laughter, behind the mocking voices, the truth remained buried in history. The truth was patient. The truth was waiting. And one day, the galaxy would be forced to remember why humans had been banned from the battlefield in the first place. The silence of peace shattered when a new enemy came from the void. They were not like the usual raiders or warlords the galaxy had known. These were machines, cold, endless, and merciless. They devoured entire colonies, stripping planets bare until nothing but dust and metal husks remained. Armies from every corner of the stars rose to fight them, but one by one, they fell. Blades could not cut fast enough, plasma could not burn deep enough, and even the greatest fleets were torn apart as if they were made of paper. In the Grand Council chamber, panic filled the air. Alien commanders shouted over each other, voices rising with fear. Some demanded retreat, others begged for unity, but all of them carried despair in their eyes. It was clear to everyone: the galaxy was losing. Worlds were burning faster than they could be defended. Entire civilizations were already gone. The enemy would not stop until everything alive was erased. Among the chaos, the human delegation sat strangely quiet. Their faces did not twist with panic like the others. They listened, they watched. When the shouting reached its loudest, one human finally stood. His voice was calm, almost too calm. "You do not want us to fight," he said slowly. "You banned us, and for good reason. But if you truly want to survive, remember what you are asking for." The chamber froze. For a moment, no one spoke. The words felt heavy, like a door opening to something long sealed away. Some scoffed, mocking the human's tone. Others felt a chill, as if a shadow had entered the room. But the desperate commanders, the ones who had already lost entire armies, leaned forward with hungry eyes. They did not care about bans. They did not care about warnings. They wanted survival, and they were willing to unleash anything to have it. The vote that followed was filled with hesitation, but desperation always wins over fear. And so the council allowed it. Humans would once again step onto the battlefield. The old law was broken, not with celebration, but with dread. Somewhere deep inside, those who still remembered the past whispered to themselves the galaxy had no idea what it was about to see again. When the call went out, humans did not answer with parades or grand speeches. They came quietly in small groups drawn not by promises of glory, but by a familiar pull of duty. Farmers put down their tools, mechanics left their workshops, and old veterans who had sworn never to fight again strapped on worn armor. Some carried weapons that had been hidden for generations, while others carried nothing but knives, hammers, or even their bare fists. They did not look like soldiers compared to the polished alien armies, yet there was something in their eyes that unsettled even the bravest commanders. The first time they assembled, the aliens laughed. The humans looked ragged, untrained, too ordinary. Some were young, barely past childhood, while others were old, scarred, and bent with age. There were no gleaming uniforms or shining armor, no precision drills or sharp salutes. To many, they looked like a band of workers dressed for the wrong task. But when they stood together, shoulder to shoulder, a strange silence spread through the crowd. Their stillness was not weakness. It was focus, like coiled springs waiting to be released. Commanders tried to teach them the standard strategies. The humans listened, nodded politely, then did things their own way. They stripped down alien rifles, rewired them, and made them fire faster. They studied the enemy machines and immediately began planning traps using nothing but scrap metal and fuel tanks. They turned supply crates into barricades, broken drones into bombs. Where others saw junk, humans saw weapons. Where others saw impossible odds, humans saw puzzles waiting to be solved. Some alien officers grew frustrated. They accused the humans of being undisciplined, reckless, too wild to be trusted. But the human leader only gave a thin smile and said, "We don't need to follow your rules. We just need to win." The words lingered, sharp as a blade. It was the same tone their ancestors had carried into battle long ago, and though most present had never heard it before, it stirred unease deep in their bones. In the evenings, around makeshift fires, the humans spoke quietly among themselves. They did not talk about medals or glory. They talked about home, about the worlds already lost, about the faces of families who would die if they failed. Their motivation was not honor, it was survival, and survival was something they had always understood better than most. Even before the first shot was fired, those who observed them began to understand why the old warnings had existed. They were not like any other army. They were ordinary people willing to become extraordinary monsters if that was what survival demanded. And for the first time in generations, the galaxy would see what happened when humans prepared themselves for war again. The machines came like a storm, metal waves sweeping across the battlefield, their weapons glowing red as they cut through alien ranks. Armies that had trained for centuries broke apart in minutes, shields collapsing, soldiers fleeing in terror. But the humans did not run. They moved forward with a grim calmness, carrying weapons that looked too small, too crude, too fragile. Yet when the first clash came, the galaxy saw something it had not witnessed in lifetimes. A human unit was pinned down in the ruins of a collapsed city. Instead of retreating, they laughed. One tore apart a broken engine and turned it into an explosive. Another grabbed a length of steel pipe and used it like a spear. When the machines pushed closer, the humans rose from cover and charged. It was not strategy. It was not bravery. It was defiance, pure and unshakable, and it ripped into the enemy like fire. The aliens watching from command screens stared in disbelief. The machines outnumbered them 5-1, but the humans fought as though numbers meant nothing. A woman with a shattered arm tied it to her chest with cloth, picked up her weapon with the other, and kept firing. A man who lost his leg crawled forward, dragging himself into the machines with grenades strapped to his chest. Even as blood stained the ground, they pushed forward, screaming, laughing, refusing to fall. The machines began to hesitate. They were designed to predict, to counter, to calculate, but there was no logic to human madness. They fought with creativity that could not be programmed. One group lured the enemy into an alley rigged with fuel tanks. Another pretended to retreat only to ambush with knives and bare hands. Every time the machines adapted, the humans broke the pattern and did something new, something reckless, something no computer could expect. The alien soldiers nearby felt their hearts pound as they watched. At first, they thought the humans were fools throwing their lives away, but then they saw the impossible happen. The machines, once unstoppable, began to fall back. Sparks flew, metal giants crumbled, and the ruins echoed not with silence, but with human voices shouting in rage and triumph. When the smoke cleared, only a handful of humans were still standing, their bodies broken, their clothes torn, but their eyes blazing. Around them lay twisted heaps of dead machines. The alien commanders whispered among themselves, their voices tight with awe and fear. They realized this was not just courage, it was something deeper, something the galaxy had tried to forget. The ban had not been a mistake. It had been a warning. Humans were not soldiers. They were something far more dangerous. Word spread faster than light. Entire battalions of machines had fallen to groups of humans so small they should not have mattered. Commanders who had dismissed them now begged for more. At first, the council thought it was exaggeration, battlefield myths born from desperation. But then the reports arrived. Footage of humans dragging themselves forward while bleeding out, of soldiers rising again and again after wounds that should have ended them, of machines retreating from fighters who should have been too broken to stand. The galaxy, for the first time in centuries, was forced to look at humans with new eyes. On the front lines, alien soldiers began to shift their positions just to be closer to human units. Fear no longer belonged to them, it belonged to the machines. When humans entered a battle, the tide turned like the pull of a moon on the sea. They turned craters into traps, ruined towers into fortresses, and even their own fallen into weapons, detonating charges beneath corpses to destroy advancing lines. Every inch of ground the machines tried to claim was paid for with 100 of their dead. One machine commander, built to study enemy behavior, reported confusion in its data. It could not calculate why humans fought the way they did. Losses that should have broken morale only made them fight harder. Wounds that should have ended battles only pushed them forward. Sacrifices that should have been madness somehow created victory. For the first time, the machines encountered something they could not adapt to. In one ruined city, a single human with a broken leg dragged himself across the battlefield, firing until his weapon melted into slag. The machines advanced cautiously, sensing a trap. They were right. He had wired explosives around his body. When they closed in, the explosion tore through half the street, stopping the advance long enough for others to regroup. That moment saved thousands. In another sector, 3 humans with nothing but knives and improvised bombs cleared a machine nest that an entire alien company had failed to breach. When asked how they did it, one simply shrugged and said, "We had no choice." Those words spread like wildfire through the ranks. To humans, no choice meant something the machines could never understand. It meant victory at any cost. Soon, alien generals no longer gave humans strict orders. They only pointed to the most impossible battles and stepped aside. Wherever humans went, the impossible shifted into possible. They were not just fighting, they were changing the entire war. And in the silent halls of the council, the elders who had once fought beside them closed their eyes, remembering. This was the reason humans had been banned. Not because they could not win, but because when they chose to win, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. The machines had never known fear, yet it crept into their movements like a shadow. Patterns once precise began to fracture whenever human units appeared. They advanced slower, retreated quicker, their algorithms bending under the weight of something they could not name. In the alien camps, soldiers who once mocked humans now watched them with uneasy eyes, torn between awe and dread. Victories came, yes, but they were victories born in fire and blood, victories that left even allies trembling at the cost. Stories whispered through the ranks. A human who fought with his throat torn open, swinging a blade until the machines scattered. A mother who carried her dead child into battle, using grief like a weapon, refusing to stop until the enemy broke before her rage. Entire units that should have fallen instead rose together, screaming, laughing, and tearing through enemies as though death itself had been banished from their path. To other species, it looked like madness. To humans, it was simply survival. Commanders tried to explain it to calm their soldiers, but there were no words strong enough. The more the machines feared, the more the allies feared as well. Not of defeat, but of the very allies who were saving them. Watching a human fight was like watching a storm tear through the sky, magnificent, unstoppable, and terrifyingly indifferent to everything in its way. In the council chambers, leaders who had voted for the ban sat in silence. They remembered the old arguments, the warnings their ancestors had spoken. They saw them now, alive in front of them, undeniable. Humans were not heroes, not warriors bound by codes of honor or laws of combat. They were something wilder, something the galaxy had no control over. Allies or not, their presence unsettled every balance of power. The whispers spread until they were no longer whispers. They became a truth carried in the eyes of every soldier, every commander, every survivor. The machines were learning fear for the first time in their existence. And the galaxy was remembering it too, remembering that humans had not been banned because they were weak, but because their strength was a force no one truly wanted to unleash. When the war finally ended, the battlefield lay in ruins. Broken machines smoldered in heaps, their once perfect lines reduced to twisted metal. The survivors stood in silence, alien soldiers too exhausted to cheer, their eyes fixed on the figures walking slowly out of the smoke. The humans were bloodied, limping, some held together by makeshift bandages and sheer will. Yet they were alive, and their faces carried no triumph, only the hard calm of those who had done what needed to be done. In the Great Council, no one laughed at humans anymore. The same leaders who once dismissed them now sat stiff in their seats, their words swallowed by unease. The humans stood before them, silent, waiting, as if daring the galaxy to speak first. At last, one elder broke the silence with trembling words, "Now you see." And everyone did. The reason for the ban was no longer legend or myth. It was truth standing in front of them, undeniable and terrifying. The ban had never been about protection. It had always been about fear. Fear that once unleashed, humans would not stop. Fear that their victories would cost too much. Fear that a species willing to burn itself to ashes just to win would leave nothing untouched. The war had proven it again. The machines had fallen, but the galaxy had stared into the storm and remembered why it had sealed it away. As the humans left the chamber, whispers followed them. No one dared to confront them, no one dared to thank them, and no one dared to provoke them. The legends were alive once more. The ban would never be questioned again, for the galaxy now understood that there was only one truth about humans on the battlefield. They were not just fighters, they were the reckoning itself.